Hey everybody, so welcome back. Saturday, how is everybody's weekend going so far? And look how this looks. It's the regular background. I look all lit and everything. It looks great. However, I know the first thing you're thinking is I'm a little bit out of sync. I know this. It's one last little thing that I gotta fix, one last little bug to get this whole thing together. But since I don't have the wire hangling out of my ear, I just said hangling, I am not a cyborg anymore. I am now with a little lapel mic, and I can do this. This is how I normally start my shows, but didn't have to be a live stream thing. So thank you guys for joining. So let me start things off by going back into yesterday's video, calling out the heroes from yesterday. I had a couple of, actually I had one super chat share. That was Timothy Tucker. I think I saw you in the live stream chat room just a second ago. Thank you, Timothy, for your, or Timothy, if I were to do a Key and Peele reference, Timothy, for your $2 yesterday. I do appreciate that. Anybody, of course, that wants to share in super chat, the way it works, you just hit the little $ thing down at the bottom of the chat room, and I'll make sure and give you a shout out. It's just a couple bucks in the tip jar, and I do appreciate it anytime somebody can do that. So, some comments from yesterday. By the way, I had McDonald's today. I'm sorry. It's an awful thing. I hate myself already. This is what regret tastes like. If you had synesthesia and could taste emotions, McDonald's is what regret would taste like. So yesterday we talked about sleep patterns, the chronotypes from the book The Power of When. Some of the comments that I got here are pretty cool. I'm going to go through them really quick. Melissa Menchaca, which is a great name, said that she and her whole family are wolves and her son is homeschooled because of this. And that kind of goes back to what I was talking about, the schooling situation, kids starting classes at 7 in the morning as teenagers. It's absolutely ridiculous. Let's see what else we got here. Gray said when he was 45, his adrenal glands flipped out, and now he's an ocelot. Well, they didn't talk about ocelots in the book, so you might be the only one, my friend. What else do we got? I actually had a couple of people, Cyberdash being one of them, that said if I had to choose between being a biological being and a non-biological one, I would pick the latter almost exclusively because of the time wasted on sleep and the pain of tiredness. That's how I feel about it. That's honestly how I feel about it. I wish I didn't have to sleep. It just feels like wasted time to me. I know some people love sleep, but I'm not one of them. And who else could I call out real quick? I'll make this really quickly. The Indigo Papillon said they are a 3 a.m. to 10 p.m. or 10 a.m. sleeper if left to their own devices, and they got a lot of thumbs up. So I think that's a lot of us out there. I'm seeing a lot of people in the live chat saying, I thought this already happened. That's because today's subject is deja vu. Now, I'm going to start by telling a quick little story. Try to keep it quick. So, my wife and I took a trip to France. This is back in 2010, I believe, so it's been a while. And we rented a car. They have right side of the street driving just like we do, so it wasn't that big of a deal. But I was driving down the street, down the highway. We were going somewhere. We were out in the country. And I got sort of like, and I don't remember exactly what the memory was, but there was a memory that popped into my head, but I couldn't quite place where I had heard it from. I couldn't quite figure out what it was. And the more I thought about it, the more my brain kind of went down a weird rabbit hole. And next thing I knew, I was like, my heart was pumping, my fingers were tingling, I was getting tunnel vision, and this whole weird thing happened. And I was like, what was that? And it lasted for a good 30 minutes or something like that. But it was sort of like deja vu, except I had some memory in my head, and I just couldn't quite place it. It's kind of like if you think of a movie scene, but you just can't quite remember what movie it's from or who that person was in that movie. There was just a gap there. And that was the first time that happened to me, but it was like a physiological thing. At first it kind of started up here, but then like I said, my fingers were tingling and I just kind of like felt this weird out of place thing. Well, anyway, so we got back from the trip and it happened again, and it happened again, and it started happening more and more. And it finally got to the point where I had to go see a doctor about it. And actually, so I had to do an EEG for a while. I got some pictures here I can show you. They had me hooked up to the EEG. I had to wear this for, I want to say 3 days before, well, anyway, I had to wear this for a few days. They were looking for issues, and the thing that they were concerned about was seizures. That sometimes there's little, I think they call them temporal, well, they are, I'll talk about it in a second. Temporal lobe seizures is what they're worried about. And of course, the temporal lobe seizures themselves are not that big a deal, but if you are prone to that, then you could be prone to something more serious, like your grand mal seizures and whatnot. Now, I've never had one of those, thankfully. I don't want to ever have one of those. But that was their concern, and so I got checked. Nothing came out of it. They didn't see anything unusual. So I still don't have an answer to it. And I haven't really had one in a while now, but it really has been a thing that's one of those little weird things that's been going on with me. And it is tied to deja vu. And the weird thing about it is that it's not, I get these feelings, these memories that couldn't possibly be real memories. You know, like one of them was in a pirate ship. One of them is me like in the shower with some dude playing guitar somewhere like in the next room. And it's just like these weird memories that I know I couldn't have possibly had, but yet they feel extremely real. They feel like I was, transported back there. So the reason why I'm bringing all this up was because, again, I was listening to a podcast the other day. This one was called Brain Stuff. If you like all the stuff that I talk about, you would love Brain Stuff. And they were talking about deja vu. And they were talking about all these different explanations for it, which I'll go through in a second. But one of them really stood out, and it was the temporal lobe epilepsy, basically. And I think that the reason why I found it interesting, and I'll go into it in a second, but it's because it ties into the brain itself in the way we're kind of getting to an understanding of how the brain works, and it's just really a bizarre thing where consciousness itself is sort of an illusion. So let me get into that. So first of all, let's talk about deja vu. Deja vu is French for the term already seen. So that's what deja vu stands for. And there's also other things like jamais vu, which is the opposite of deja vu, where you're doing something that you do all the time, but it feels like you've never done it before. That's another one. But 2/3 of people have had it. They last 10 to 30 seconds long when you experience it. It's most prone between people between the ages of 15 and 25. Great, I'm about to sneeze. Sorry. Live streaming. I'm going to sneeze on a live stream. Anyway, 15 to 25 years old, people are more prone to it. People who are more educated, and also people with psychological disorders tend to have it. So, yay, me! Okay, so there's a couple of different types that they talk about in the podcast. One is called associative deja vu, which is basically triggered by a specific moment or thing. The other is biological deja vu, and this is the one that goes back to temporal lobe issues and stuff like that. Things that are going on inside your brain. They can also be created by electrical stimulation. Scientists have been able to go through and specifically electrically stimulate certain areas of the brain to cause a deja vu. Anxiety can also be a trigger and produce it, and that was something else that kind of stuck out to me with my situation. I've talked about my anxiety issues before. I always wondered if it was something kind of underneath the surface that was causing these little episodes to happen, but it wasn't like the panic attacks thing that I used to have. It's a totally different thing. And in fact, I wondered if, see, when I had these episodes, I would, I didn't black out. I might get a little bit of tunnel vision. It lasted that long. But sometimes when it was over, I felt like I didn't know where I was. Like I might be in my living room, and then when it was over, I'd feel like, where am I, And the thing is, when I kind of went into that weird place, there was almost something comfortable or comforting. It was like this familiarity with something that I knew I shouldn't be familiar with. And so part of me thought maybe that like is some subconscious way that my brain is kind of getting away from latent anxiety that I'm not dealing with. It kind of like finds this comfortable place and runs and hides to it. Very weird theory, but that was always part of my theory. But anxiety can produce it. Dopamine, if you're on a dopamine drug, can produce it. So some of the theories, I'm just going to go through these really quickly, and some of these do tie into kind of some of the stuff that I was just talking about, the temporal lobe thing. But so I'm kind of reading a little bit here, so apologize if I'm not kind of doing this. But the medial temporal lobe, that's kind of what I was talking about. It's involved in our sensory perception and in the establishment of our memory. So that's why they believe that it has a large part to play with deja vu and why weird electrical freakouts in your brain, seizure-like, could be having something to do with it. But what it basically does is it saves on brain power by focusing on novel things instead of familiar things. So like the stuff you see every day, your brain doesn't need to process that because it knows the space, you know? So it focuses on more novel things. And something in that switch between novel and familiar is where the deja vu happens. So another way of looking at it, they call one theory a divided attention theory, where it's like you might have seen this thing before, but you just weren't paying attention. You know, there are coincidences in our lives. There are definitely moments that repeat. And some of the deja vu that I've had in the past, what was interesting about it was that it was a deja vu where I was remembering another time that I was having deja vu. It was like deja vuception or something. Like I was having multiple instances of deja vu over the same moment. And so that's kind of what this one's talking about. It's saying like it's possible that we really are experiencing similar situations. It's just maybe the last time you experienced it, your brain didn't really process it and you didn't really pay attention to it. But now you are paying attention to it and it comes back up to the surface. So that's an interesting idea. One of them is called hologram theory. Gotta love anything called hologram. And I don't really understand this one so much, but it was basically making the point that if you take a hologram, you can slice, it's a 3D image, you can slice it, and those slices will give you the same image but at a lower resolution, and that there's a possibility that in your brain, sort of a trigger can, it says it happens when a fragment of a memory triggers the remembrance of a full scene. So like you might just see one little piece of a memory that pops up in your head, and then it kind of triggers the entire memory to come out through like this hologram reference. Not sure I understand that one as much. There's one called dual processing theory. Dual processing theory goes back to the temporal lobe. So what it does is your temporal lobe, it takes in information and kind of gives it a once-over processing, but then it sends it over to the right hemisphere for additional processing. And this was actually talked about quite a bit in this book that I have over here called Who's in Charge, which I will be talking about in a later live stream and other stuff. Fascinating, fascinating stuff. But it's basically making the point that your temporal lobe takes in information, then sends it over to the right hemisphere for processing. And sometimes there could be a little bit of a slip where it mislabels data in the second time around. So, the temporal lobe takes it in, sends it to the right hemisphere, then the right hemisphere sends it back to the temporal lobe. It kind of comes back to the temporal lobe as data mislabeled as something familiar when it's actually new. So that's one possibility of it. So you've got something new, but it's kind of being processed and stamped and tagged with familiarity. So even though it's new, your brain's processing it as something familiar. So that gives it a deja vu sensation. And the last one that I'll bring up real quick, and I just like the name of this one, it's called leaky processing theory. So I'm just going to read this and then I can explain it. So our brains store current input in short-term memory and then moves it to more important things that gets moved into long-term memory. So what they're saying is that maybe a bit of information leaps directly into the long-term memory. It skips the short-term memory. So you can imagine like you've got your processing and you got short-term, and then what's important goes straight into long-term. But sometimes information might bypass the short-term memory and go straight into long-term memory. And so your mind processes that as something familiar and old that happened once before. I find that really interesting. So it's like data slipping past the gatekeeper right into the long-term memory, and it makes it feel like it's old. And I find that fascinating. So one last little thing to conclude this, and then I'll go into the live chat and chat, is, going back to that book I was talking about. It's called Who's in Charge. It's really starting to fascinate me. I've read that book, and there's another book called Subliminal that's also about your brain's subconscious processes and stuff. And we've always had this sort of diametrically situated idea of what our brain was. We have the conscious brain and then the subconscious brain. But what we're starting to figure out is that it's not so simple as that. It's actually multiple, possibly up to a couple dozen semi-conscious modules in your brain communicating with each other that creates the consciousness that we have. In a sense, the consciousness that we experience is kind of an illusion. And that's where things get really crazy to me, when you start talking about the brain and how the brain works. So what we basically have is a bunch of semi-conscious areas in our brains communicating with each other, and sometimes data slips to the wrong module where it's supposed to be, or a module interprets data a little bit wrong. Sometimes there's a weird communication between different modules. And the idea is, with all these theories, some variation of that is what creates this feeling of deja vu. Now, of course, there's always the crazy theories about, I call it crazy. I don't mean to call it crazy, but the more out there theories of past life events. Like I said, one of the scenes that I would get in my head that would make me go down this rabbit hole was like a pirate scene. Like I was a pirate at some point. So some people might say, ooh, that's proof of a past life. I think that's a bit of a stretch. But some people believe that. Some people believe it's information traveling from other dimensions. And if you believe in like a superconscious universal being kind of thing, it could be some slippage from another conscious being into us, if you believe in that sort of theory of consciousness. But it's a fascinating topic, and it's something that obviously I've had personal experience with my own little weird episodes. But I think that's a bit about all I got to say about deja vu today. So I'm going to take a sip of this nasty Coke from the Regret House, and I will step into live chat. And if you guys have any questions, I'll answer it. I'll stick around for about 5 more minutes. I do appreciate you guys being here. Let's see how many people we have right now. 20 watching? Okay, it's Saturday. It's Saturday. I see John Gwartney on there. You've been commenting quite a bit. I appreciate that. I know you didn't get a chance to catch any of the other live streams. It's good to see you on there. Deja vuception is when the Matrix has a really big bug from... am I saying that right? Amre Mutlu? it's got to be short for something. That's funny. Ora Mitchell says she actually has deja vu very regularly. I don't want to be alarming. I just know that when I went in with this issue, like they immediately were like, we need to make sure you're not having seizures. So if it's something that's actually causing issues in your life, I want to get that checked out. I'm not trying to be alarming. I'm not trying to play doctor, but I'm just looking out for you. Okay. So, and Ballistic Penguin says the same thing. You get deja vu a ton. I guess if it's not causing issues in your life, in my case, it was like I said, it caused physiological. I would get tunnel vision. I never passed out or anything like that. It would happen on the road a few times, but I was always okay. The thing that got me was I was able to block it a little bit. Like if I could feel it coming, I would hold off. And something else that I read getting ready for this was it saying that people with epilepsy and people who get seizures can sometimes, that can be like a trigger, like they know they're about to have a seizure because they have a deja vu. So it's kind of like it gives them time to get to a safe space or something like that. Ora Mitchell is not a she. I apologize for that. Sir? Mister? Ora is like a female name, isn't it? Okay, I apologize. I didn't mean it like that. Army P, don't you find it challenging to dive into this higher thought discovery discussions but still tied to more basic primal requirements of day-to-day life? Oh, that's an interesting question. No. I'm just great that way. I can go right back and forth into the blah, blah, blah. No. I don't know. These are just things that have always been interesting to me. It's just something that I always think about. Like as I go through my daily life, it just happens. I don't find that too much of a challenge. I find it a challenge to be well researched on these things, which is why these live streams are really me just like, hey, I heard this on a podcast, I want to talk about it because I find it interesting. The regular videos, I really do have to research and spend more time on it. That can be a challenge just because of time constraints and whatnot. Crafty Karen, hi, just joined. Hello, Crafty, how are you? Crafty Karen with a smile. Let's see, what else we got? I think I'll take one more quick question and then head out because it's already 20 minutes in and it's Saturday. We got better things to be doing, right? Actually, there's nothing better to be doing than by joining me. And by the way, you guys that have been following the channel for a while, let me know how you think about these live streams. This is it's my fourth one, and I think the quality is getting better. I know I'm a little bit out of sync here. I think I have a fix for it, but I got to go get another piece of equipment, and I may go try to get that today. Aura says it's my great-grandfather's name. I've met women with my name, though, literally, first and last name. Oh, that's funny. Well, I apologize for that. So my last name is Scott, which is also a first name, and I get called Scott all the time. And one of my favorite things is this channel is called Answers with Joe, and yet I still get comments from people who refer to me as Scott. I'm like, I couldn't have made that easier for you. So I feel you, bro. Sorry about that. Jason Hagelson. All right, so I'm going to ask you, I just got here, so I missed most of the conversation. What about the Groundhog's Day theory that we live the same life over and over again? Funny you should say that. I watched Groundhog Day last night. I missed it. I didn't think to watch it on Groundhog's Day, but I watched it yesterday. I love that movie, and it's actually pretty profound when you think about how. In fact, I had heard like some of the earlier versions of the script. It was a very like spiritual kind of film, but the idea that Groundhog's Day theory that we live the same life over and over again. Okay, so I'm gonna respond to this really quickly, and then I'm gonna head out because this is kind of a big topic. But so the guy who wrote The Martian, his name's Andy Weir. I've got the book back here, don't I? What happened to it? Used to be back there. Anyway, so he wrote this story called The Egg, and it's kind of like I could see people using this as sort of a religious reference, and I kind of wish there was a real religion out there like this, but it's basically this short story where this guy dies and he meets God, and I'm going to paraphrase really quickly just to bust through this, but basically he finds out that every single human being was him in another life, and that he was about to be reincarnated again as like a Chinese girl in the 5th century or something like that. So time doesn't matter; you can be reincarnated anywhere. But the point is that every single person that has ever lived has been the same person, just trying to learn a little bit more about the human condition. The point being that after you do that enough times, you become a god yourself. And I always found that interesting as just a thought experiment. And I always thought, if people actually believed that about the world and about reality, that the world would probably be a much better place, because everybody that you meet is you. So everybody that you cause pain to, you're causing that pain to yourself. It's an interesting philosophical idea. So that was a little bit of a jump from what you said. But okay, guys, so we're about 25 minutes in. I keep saying I'm going to keep these shorter, and I never do. Thank you guys for joining. Tomorrow, what do I have tomorrow? Real quick. Tomorrow I'm going to talk, this is going to be a little bit different. I'm going to talk about the progress of society at different periods throughout history. I've kind of stumbled on this idea that maybe there was more progress that happened in the 1800s, more fundamental progress that happened in the 1800s than in the 1900s. And I have an argument to make for that. I'm not saying I'm right. It's just a thought I've had, and I thought I would share it. So, all right, guys, that's enough for me. You guys have the rest of a great weekend. I really just said that sentence. That makes no sense. Have a great weekend. And if you can come back here tomorrow at 2, we're going to do this again. And hopefully the quality will be a little bit better. I just keep trying to keep improving on it. Love you guys. Thanks for joining, and I'll see you next time. Bye.